The power of the pause. There's a moment, just before you speak in anger, where everything hangs in balance. What happens next could save or destroy a relationship. When someone says something that makes your blood boil, try this. Pause for exactly 3 seconds before responding. Count them slowly in your mind. In those 3 precious seconds, something remarkable happens in your brain. The emotional flood that was about to pour out through your mouth gets redirected through your rational mind instead. The amygdala, your brain's alarm system, starts to calm down. The angry words that were about to spill out, they often disappear completely, replaced by something far more effective and thoughtful. This isn't just self-control, it's rewiring your automatic responses. The more you practice this pause, the more natural it becomes, until eventually that 3-second gap becomes your superpower in every heated conversation. The mirroring effect. What if I told you that people decide whether they like you within the first 7 seconds of meeting you? And what if there was a way to tip those scales in your favor? Here's the secret that social psychologists have known for decades. Subtly mirror their body language, posture, and speaking pace. If they lean forward while talking, you lean forward a moment later. If they speak slowly and deliberately, you slow down your own speech to match. If they gesture with their hands, you incorporate gentle hand movements too. But here's the crucial part. Make it natural, like a soft echo rather than an obvious reflection. People instinctively trust and feel comfortable around those who seem similar to them. It's as if their subconscious whispers, "This person gets me. They understand my rhythm." The key is subtlety. Too obvious and it feels creepy. Just right, and they walk away feeling like they've met someone truly compatible. The Benjamin Franklin effect. This one sounds impossible, but it works like magic. The more someone helps you, the more they like you. Want someone to like you more? Ask them for a small favor. Not a big one that would burden them, something tiny, like borrowing a pen, asking for directions, or requesting a small piece of advice. When they help you, their brain creates a strange but powerful logic. I helped this person, so I must like them. It's called cognitive consistency. Our minds hate contradiction, so they adjust our feelings to match our actions. Benjamin Franklin discovered this accidentally when he asked a political rival to lend him a rare book. The man not only lent the book, but began speaking to Franklin warmly afterward. They eventually became lifelong friends. The beauty of this trick is that it creates a positive cycle. They help you, they like you more, so they're more willing to help you again. But remember, start small, express genuine gratitude, and never abuse this psychological quirk. The name repetition technique. There's a sound more beautiful to any person than their own name. But most people use this knowledge wrong. When you meet someone new, don't just say their name once and forget it. Weave it naturally into your conversation at least 3 times within the first few minutes. "Nice to meet you, Sarah." Then later, "Sarah, that's such an interesting point about the project." And before you part, "Sarah, I really enjoyed our conversation." But here's what most people miss. It's not just about repetition. When you say someone's name, you're sending a signal that they matter enough for you to remember and use something personal to them. Their brain lights up with recognition and pleasure. However, overdo it and you'll sound like a pushy salesperson. The magic number seems to be 3 times in a first conversation, then naturally throughout future interactions. People will walk away feeling like you really saw them. The foot in the door phenomenon. Want someone to agree to something big? Start impossibly small. This technique has been tested thousands of times, and it works with stunning consistency. Start by asking for something so small that saying no would seem unreasonable. Once they say yes to that tiny request, their brain begins to see them as the kind of person who helps you. Then you can gradually increase your requests. Researchers tested this by first asking homeowners to place a small, neat sign in their window supporting safe driving. 2 weeks later, they asked the same people to install a large, ugly sign in their front yard. Those who had agreed to the small sign were 4 times more likely to agree to the large one. The key is that each yes changes how people see themselves. They think, I must be someone who supports this cause, making the next yes easier. But use this ethically. Help people become the helpful, generous person they want to be. Don't manipulate them into things that aren't in their interest. The door-in-the-face technique. Sometimes asking for too much is the perfect way to get exactly what you want. This is the flip side of the previous trick. Start with a request so large that any reasonable person would refuse it. Then immediately follow up with your real request, something much smaller and more reasonable. The contrast makes your actual request seem modest and fair. Researchers demonstrated this by first asking college students to volunteer for 2 hours a week for 2 years at a juvenile detention center. Predictably, everyone said no. Then, they asked if the students would be willing to take juvenile offenders on a single 2-hour trip to the zoo. The agreement rate jumped to 50% compared to just 17% when they asked for the zoo trip directly. Why does this work? When you make that first outrageous request, people feel a bit guilty for refusing. They want to be helpful, so when you offer them an easier way to say yes, they grab it. It's like psychological relief. But again, use this to create win-win situations, not to trick people into things they'll regret. The Zeigarnik effect. Your brain has a secret obsession with unfinished business, and you can use this to your advantage. Have you ever noticed how you can forget a completed task instantly, but an interrupted one haunts your mind for hours? That's the Zeigarnik effect, named after the psychologist who discovered that our brains give priority to incomplete tasks. Waiters can remember complex orders perfectly until the food is served, then immediately forget them. You can use this in 2 powerful ways. First, when you want to remember something important, don't fully complete your thought about it. Leave a mental loose end. Your brain will keep working on it in the background. Second, when you're procrastinating on a big project, don't aim to finish it, just aim to start it. Once you begin, your brain's natural tendency will be to want to complete it. Even if you stop, you'll find yourself thinking about it and looking for opportunities to continue. It's like creating a mental itch that your brain desperately wants to scratch. The mere exposure effect. The more familiar something becomes, the more we like it. This simple truth shapes everything from friendships to marketing. Scientists have found that we tend to prefer things we've been exposed to more often, even if we don't consciously notice the repetition. In one study, researchers flashed Chinese characters on a screen so quickly that people couldn't consciously see them. Later, when shown the same characters alongside new ones, people consistently preferred the ones they'd been subliminally exposed to. You can use this in relationships by simply being around people more often. That colleague who seemed cold at first? Spend more casual time near them. Grab coffee at the same time. Take breaks in the same area. The increased exposure will naturally make them feel more comfortable with you. But here's the catch. This only works if the initial interactions are neutral or positive. If someone already dislikes you, more exposure might just make them dislike you more.
So start with friendly, brief encounters and let familiarity work its magic.
The anchoring bias. The first number someone hears influences every decision that follows. This knowledge is worth its weight in gold. When negotiating anything, salary, house price, project deadline, the first number mentioned sets an invisible anchor in everyone's mind. All subsequent discussions revolve around that initial figure. If you're selling something worth $100 and the first offer mentioned is $150, the final price will likely be higher than if the first mention was $80. Real estate agents know this intimately. They show overpriced houses first, making everything else seem reasonable by comparison. You can use this ethically by doing your research first. If you're negotiating salary, find out the market rate and mention the higher end early in the conversation. If you're setting a project timeline, mention a slightly longer time frame initially. The key is to be the first to mention numbers and to make those numbers work in your favor. But remember, extreme anchors backfire. Set your anchor high, but keep it within the realm of possibility. The reciprocity principle. Give first, receive later. But there's a specific way to give that multiplies your returns. Humans are hardwired to return favors. It's so deep in our psychology that we feel physically uncomfortable when we owe someone something. But here's what most people get wrong. They give expecting immediate returns, or they give things that don't really matter to the recipient. The secret is to give something small but meaningful before you need anything in return. A genuine compliment, a useful piece of information, a small favor that costs you little but helps them significantly. Then, and this is crucial, don't immediately ask for something back. Let time pass. Let them feel the natural human urge to reciprocate build up. When you do eventually need their help, they'll be psychologically primed to want to balance the scales. Studies show that people will often give back more than they received, especially if your original gift was unexpected and felt personal to them. The contrast principle. Show someone something terrible, and suddenly mediocre looks amazing. Our brains don't judge things in isolation. They judge them in comparison to what came before. Restaurants know this when they list an extremely expensive wine first on their menu, making the second most expensive option seem reasonable by comparison. You can use this principle ethically in many situations. When presenting solutions to a problem, mention a few difficult or expensive options first, then present your preferred solution. When asking for time off, mention you might need a whole week, then ask for the 3 days you actually want. When setting expectations for a project, describe what a bare minimum result would look like, then exceed those expectations. The key is creating a reference point that makes your real request or offer look appealing by comparison. But be honest, use real alternatives, not made-up extremes. The curiosity gap. There's a specific way to share information that makes people desperate to hear more. Our brains hate information gaps. When you create a small mystery, people's minds become like water flowing downhill. They naturally want to fill that empty space. Instead of saying, "I learned something interesting today," try, "I learned something today that completely changed how I think about productivity." Instead of, "I have good news," try, "I have news that's going to make your day so much better." The gap between what they know and what they want to know creates psychological tension that can only be resolved by hearing the rest. But there's an art to this. Make the gap too wide, and people might not care enough to ask. Make it too narrow, and there's no tension. The sweet spot is giving enough information to spark curiosity while withholding the most interesting detail. This works in presentations, conversations, even emails. Create the itch, then provide the scratch. The commitment escalation. Once people say something out loud,
They become psychologically invested in making it true. When someone states a position or makes a commitment verbally, especially in front of others, they feel internal pressure to act consistently with that statement. This is why support groups ask people to share their goals out loud, and why salespeople ask customers to verbally confirm they want to buy something. You can use this by asking people to articulate their commitments. Instead of assuming your teammate will finish their part of the project, ask them to verbally confirm when they'll have it done. Instead of hoping your friend will join you at the gym, ask them to state out loud that they're committed to going with you twice this week. When people hear themselves make these commitments, they're much more likely to follow through. It's as if their own words become a contract with themselves. But make sure the commitments are realistic and genuinely beneficial to them. You're helping them succeed, not trapping them. The false attribution. Your brain constantly guesses why you feel certain ways, and it's wrong more often than you think. People often misidentify the source of their emotions, and you can use this knowledge to create positive associations. If you want someone to feel good about you or your ideas, meet them in places or situations that naturally make them feel good. Grab coffee at their favorite spot. Have important conversations while walking in nature. Schedule meetings right after their lunch break when they're likely to be in a better mood. Their brain will partially attribute those positive feelings to you, even though the real source was the environment or timing. Researchers have found that people rate others as more attractive when meeting them on a scary suspension bridge, mistaking fear arousal for romantic attraction, or more trustworthy when holding a warm cup of coffee. Physical warmth translating to emotional warmth. The key is subtlety. Create genuinely pleasant experiences rather than trying to manipulate people's emotions. The scarcity principle. Tell someone they can't have something, and suddenly they want it more than ever. Limited availability creates urgency and increases perceived value. But here's the twist. Real scarcity works better than artificial scarcity. Instead of saying, "This offer is only available until midnight," which everyone recognizes as a sales tactic, focus on legitimate limitations. I only have time to take on 2 more projects this month. There are only 5 spots left in the workshop. I can only recommend 3 candidates for this opportunity. When the scarcity is genuine, people respond more authentically. They think faster, decide quicker, and value the opportunity more. But don't manufacture fake scarcity. It backfires when people discover the truth. Instead, be honest about real limitations on your time, availability, or resources. Scarcity works because it forces people to prioritize and makes them realize what they might lose if they don't act. The peak end rule. People judge entire experiences based on just 2 moments, the peak and the end. Whether an experience was 5 minutes or 5 hours, our brains primarily remembered the most intense moment and how it concluded. This is why a mediocre dinner with an amazing dessert feels like a great meal, or why a fun vacation with a terrible last day leaves us with mixed feelings. You can design better experiences by understanding this rule. If you're giving a presentation, make sure you have one standout moment, your peak, and end on a high note. If you're planning a date, ensure there's one memorable highlight and the goodbye is warm and positive. Even in difficult conversations, try to end with something hopeful or constructive. Customer service experts use this by resolving problems with unexpected generosity, turning a negative experience into a positive memory. The middle parts of experiences fade from memory, but peaks and endings stick forever. The consistency principle. People will go to extraordinary lengths to appear consistent with their previous actions and statements. Once someone takes a small action that aligns with a particular identity, they're much more likely to take bigger actions that fit that same identity. If someone recycles one bottle, they're more likely to see themselves as environmentally conscious and recycle more in the future. If they make one small donation to charity, they're more likely to donate again. You can use this by helping people take small steps toward becoming the person they want to be. Ask for tiny commitments that align with their values. If someone says they value health, ask them to commit to one healthy choice today. If they say they're a team player, ask them to help with one small team task. Each small action builds their identity and makes future similar actions easier. The key is starting so small that saying no would seem inconsistent with their stated values. The social proof principle. We look to others to determine what's normal, appropriate, and correct. When we're uncertain about how to behave, we automatically look around to see what others are doing. Hotels increased towel reuse by 33% simply by changing their sign from "Help save the environment" to "Most guests reuse their towels." The power of "most people like you" is enormous. You can use this by mentioning what similar others do. Most people in your situation choose. Other managers I work with typically. People who care about quality usually. But be truthful. False social proof backfires spectacularly when discovered. The most powerful social proof comes from people who are similar to your audience. A testimonial from someone in the same industry, same age group, or same situation carries much more weight than a generic endorsement. When possible, be specific. 73% of our clients see results within 30 days, works better than most clients see results quickly. The authority principle. People instinctively defer to expertise, but you don't need a PhD to be seen as an authority. We're programmed to respect authority figures, but authority can be established in subtle ways. Share relevant credentials when appropriate. Mention your experience casually. Reference other experts who support your position. Even physical symbols of authority, how you dress, where you sit, what's behind you in video calls, influence how people perceive your expertise. But the most powerful form of authority is demonstrated competence. Show, don't just tell. Instead of saying, "I'm an expert in productivity," share a specific insight that demonstrates your knowledge. Instead of mentioning your years of experience, tell a brief story that showcases your wisdom. People resist being told someone is an authority, but they naturally recognize expertise when they see it in action. The goal isn't to manipulate people into false deference, but to help them recognize your genuine areas of competence. The liking principle. We say yes to people we like, but likability can be developed systematically. People prefer to work with, buy from, and help those they like. But likability isn't just about being nice, it's about genuine connection. We like people who are similar to us, who compliment us genuinely, who cooperate with us towards shared goals, and who show they like us first. Find genuine similarities and mention them. Give authentic compliments about things you actually appreciate. Work together on shared objectives rather than competing, and show that you enjoy their company through your attention and engagement. But here's the crucial part. This only works if it's genuine. Fake similarity, Hollow compliments and forced cooperation are easily detected and create the opposite effect. The goal is to find and nurture the real connections that exist between you and others, not to manufacture false relationships.
The von Restorff effect. In a list of similar items, the one that stands out gets remembered. Also called the isolation effect, this principle explains why we remember the one red item in a list of black items, or why unusual events stick in our memory while routine ones fade. You can use this to make important information more memorable. When giving a presentation, make your key point visually different. Use a different color, font, or slide design. When sending emails, make critical information stand out with formatting. When introducing yourself, mention one unique and interesting fact that sets you apart from others in your field. But don't overuse this technique. If everything is highlighted, nothing stands out. Choose one or two truly important elements to emphasize and let the contrast do the work. The goal is strategic memorability, not chaotic attention-seeking. The halo effect. One positive trait creates a glow that makes everything else look better. When we perceive someone as having one highly positive quality, we automatically assume they have other positive qualities too. Attractive people are often perceived as more intelligent and trustworthy. Well-dressed people are seen as more competent. People who speak confidently are assumed to be more knowledgeable. You can leverage this by identifying your strongest positive trait and making sure it shines early in interactions. If you're highly knowledgeable, demonstrate that expertise quickly. If you're particularly reliable, mention a time when your reliability made a difference. If you're creative, share a creative insight or solution. Once people form a positive impression in one area, they'll be more likely to see your other qualities in a positive light too. But remember, this effect can work in reverse if the initial impression is negative, so always put your best foot forward first. The endowment effect. People value things more highly simply because they own them. Once someone possesses something, or even just imagines possessing it, they value it more than they did before they owned it. Car salespeople use this by encouraging test drives. Software companies offer free trials. Retailers have generous return policies because they know once you take something home, you're less likely to give it up. You can use this principle by helping people imagine ownership or experience temporary possession of your ideas. Instead of just describing a solution, help them visualize implementing it. Use phrases like, "when you use this approach," or "once this is in place," rather than "if you decide to." Let people try your suggestions on a small scale first. Once they experience even small benefits, they'll be more invested in the larger change. The key is making the leap from consideration to experience as small and risk-free as possible.
The contrast effect. Everything is relative, and you can control what people compare things to. The same temperature feels hot after being in the cold, and cool after being in the heat. The same salary offer feels generous or insulting, depending on what you expected. The same workload seems manageable or overwhelming based on what you're used to. You can use this by controlling the comparison points. Before presenting your idea, mention the more difficult alternatives. Before discussing your rates, reference higher market prices. Before showing your timeline, mention what a rushed job would look like. But you can also use contrast to make others feel good. Before sharing good news, reference how bad things could have been. Before praising someone's work, acknowledge the challenges they faced. The goal is to create a frame of reference that makes your offer look reasonable or their achievement look impressive.
The loss aversion principle. People hate losing things twice as much as they like gaining things. The pain of losing $100 is roughly twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining $100. This is why "don't lose out" is often more motivating than "here's what you'll gain." You can frame your communications to tap into this natural bias. Instead of "this will save you money," try "this prevents you from wasting money." Instead of "you'll gain productivity," try "you'll stop losing hours to inefficiency." Instead of "here are the benefits," try "here's what you're missing out on." But use this ethically. Help people avoid real losses. Don't manufacture fake fears. The most powerful use of loss aversion is helping people recognize valuable opportunities they might otherwise miss, or real risks they need to address. The anchoring and adjustment bias. People make estimates by starting from an initial value and adjusting from there, but they don't adjust enough. When asked if Gandhi was older or younger than 144 when he died, people give higher estimates for his actual age than when asked if he was older or younger than 32. The ridiculous anchor of 144 still influences their thinking. In negotiations, whoever mentions numbers first sets the anchor. In planning, whatever timeline is suggested first becomes the reference point. You can use this by being the first to suggest reasonable numbers that work in your favor. When estimating project timelines, mention your preferred time frame first. When discussing budgets, reference figures that align with your needs. When setting expectations, anchor them at levels that give you room to exceed them. But remember, extreme anchors backfire because they seem unrealistic. The best anchors are aggressive but believable. The availability heuristic. People judge probability by how easily they can recall examples. We think shark attacks are more common than they are because they're memorable and frequently reported. We overestimate the danger of flying and underestimate the danger of driving because plane crashes get more media attention. You can use this by making your points more memorable and vivid. Instead of sharing statistics, tell stories. Instead of abstract benefits, give concrete examples. Instead of general claims, provide specific instances. If you want someone to believe something is common, give them several easy-to-remember examples. If you want them to take a risk seriously, help them visualize what could go wrong. But be honest. Don't manipulate people's perceptions of real risks for your benefit.
The confirmation bias. People seek information that confirms what they already believe and ignore information that contradicts it. This bias is so strong that people will actively avoid learning facts that might challenge their existing views. You can work with this instead of against it by finding angles that align with what people already believe. If someone values efficiency, frame your idea in terms of efficiency gains. If they prioritize safety, emphasize the safety benefits. If they care about tradition, show how your approach honors traditional values while improving outcomes. Start with common ground, then gradually introduce new information. People are much more open to ideas that feel like extensions of their existing beliefs rather than challenges to them. The key is genuinely finding these connection points, not manipulating people's existing biases for your own gain. The sunk cost fallacy. People continue investing in losing propositions because they don't want to waste what they've already invested. This is why people stay in bad relationships longer if they've been together for years, or why companies continue funding failing projects because they've already spent so much money.
While you should be careful not to exploit this bias unfairly, you can use it positively by helping people recognize their existing investments. When someone is considering giving up on a worthwhile goal, remind them of the progress they've already made. When they're hesitating to commit to something valuable, help them see what they've already invested in related areas, but also help people recognize when this bias is working against them. Sometimes the wisest choice is to cut losses and start fresh regardless of past investments. The decoy effect. Adding a clearly inferior option makes other options look more attractive. Movie theaters sell small popcorn for $3, medium for $6.50, and large for $7. The medium is deliberately overpriced to make the large seem like a bargain. Restaurants put expensive wines on their menu, not to sell them, but to make moderately expensive wines seem reasonable. You can use this principle by introducing options that make your preferred choice look good by comparison. When presenting solutions, include one that's clearly less appealing. When offering your services at different levels, create a middle option that makes your premium offering seem like great value. But make sure all options are genuine. The decoy should be real but less attractive, not fake or misleading. The framing effect. How you present information matters as much as the information itself. 90% fat-free sounds better than contains 10% fat, even though they mean exactly the same thing. 4 out of 5 doctors recommend sounds more impressive than 20% of doctors don't recommend. You can use framing to help people see information in the most useful light. Frame challenges as opportunities. Frame problems as puzzles to solve. Frame setbacks as learning experiences. Frame your expertise in terms of results achieved rather than years spent. Frame requests in terms of mutual benefit rather than one-sided asks. The key is choosing frames that are both truthful and helpful. You're not changing the facts, just presenting them in ways that help people make better decisions.
The primacy effect. First impressions are incredibly powerful, but so are first positions in any sequence. In lists, the first items are remembered better than those in the middle. In arguments, the first point made carries extra weight. In presentations, the opening moments set the tone for everything that follows. Use this by putting your strongest points first. When listing benefits, start with the most compelling ones. When making arguments, lead with your best evidence. When introducing yourself, mention your most impressive credential or achievement early. But don't waste the primacy effect on small details. Save it for the information that matters most. People will remember and give extra weight to whatever you put first, so make sure it's worth remembering. The recency effect. The last thing people hear often determines how they feel about the entire experience. While first impressions matter, final impressions matter too. In negotiations, the last offer made influences the final agreement. In presentations, the closing thoughts determine what people remember. In conversations, how you say goodbye affects how people feel about the entire interaction. End important interactions on positive notes. Conclude presentations with your most inspiring points. Finish emails with warm, forward-looking statements. Close negotiations with win-win summaries. The recency effect is your second chance to make a lasting impression, so use it wisely. People's final emotional state becomes their overall memory of the experience. The bandwagon effect. People do things because other people do them, especially people they respect. This is social proof taken to the next level. We don't just look to others for guidance, we actively want to be part of the group,
to be on the winning side. You can use this by highlighting momentum and growing participation. More people are choosing. The trend toward. Join the increasing number of people who. But the most powerful version is when you can show that respected individuals or groups are already on board. Leading companies in your industry are. Experts are increasingly recommending. Innovative organizations like yours are. The key is making people feel they're joining something positive and forward-moving, not just following the crowd blindly. The hindsight bias. After something happens, people believe they knew it all along. This bias makes people overconfident in their ability to predict outcomes and less appreciative of good advice. But you can use it positively by helping people recognize patterns after successful outcomes. When someone achieves a goal using your advice, help them see the wisdom of the approach they took. When a project succeeds, review the key decisions that made it work. This doesn't just build confidence, it helps people internalize successful strategies so they can use them again. The key is timing. Wait until after positive outcomes to reinforce the good decisions that led to them. The mere categorization effect. Simply putting things into categories makes people see them differently. When researchers gave people the same list of items but grouped them into categories, people rated items within each category as more similar to each other and more different from items in other categories. You can use this to help people organize their thinking. Instead of presenting a long list of benefits, group them into categories like time savings, cost reduction, and quality improvement. Instead of describing yourself with a random list of qualities, organize them into technical skills, leadership experience, and creative abilities. Categories help people process and remember information better, and they make your point seem more comprehensive and organized. The contrast sensitivity. Small differences become bigger when they're the only differences. In a room full of tall people, a medium-height person looks short. In different contexts, the same qualities can appear very different. You can use this by choosing your contexts carefully. If you want to emphasize your experience, mention it when discussing a challenge that requires experience. If you want to highlight your creativity, bring it up when everyone else is giving conventional answers. If you want to show your reliability, reference it when discussing problems caused by unreliability. The key is creating situations where your strengths naturally stand out against the backdrop of what's missing or what others typically offer. The planning fallacy. People consistently underestimate how long tasks will take, but you can use this knowledge to your advantage. Most people are optimistic about timelines, both their own and others. You can use this by being the person who gives realistic estimates and delivers on time. While others are promising impossible deadlines, you can build trust by being honest about what's actually achievable. But you can also help others by teaching them to account for this bias. When someone gives you an estimate, ask them to consider what could go wrong or take longer than expected. Help them think through the assumptions they're making. This makes you valuable as someone who helps others avoid painful surprises. The overconfidence effect. People are more confident in their judgments than they should be, especially in areas where they know little. The less someone knows about a topic, the more confident they tend to be about their opinions on it. You can use this knowledge by being humble about your expertise. Paradoxically, admitting the limits of your knowledge makes people trust your expertise more. When you say, "I don't know" about things outside your area,
People believe you more when you demonstrate knowledge in your area. You can also help others by asking questions that reveal the gaps in their thinking, not to embarrass them, but to help them make better decisions. The fundamental attribution error. We judge others by their actions, but ourselves by our intentions. When someone is late, we think they're disorganized. When we're late, it's because of traffic. You can use this knowledge to give others the benefit of the doubt, which makes them more likely to do the same for you. When someone makes a mistake, consider the situational factors that might have contributed. When giving feedback, focus more on changing the situation than changing the person. This approach makes you easier to work with and more influential because people feel understood rather than judged. The halo effect in reverse. One negative trait can cast a shadow over everything else. Just as positive traits create positive assumptions, negative traits create negative assumptions. A single typo in an email can make someone question your attention to detail in other areas. Being late to one meeting can make people wonder about your reliability in general. You can use this knowledge defensively by being extra careful about first impressions and early interactions. Make sure your weakest areas don't undermine your strongest ones. If you're not naturally organized, invest extra effort in appearing organized during important interactions. The goal isn't to be perfect, but to manage the impressions that matter most. The self-serving bias. People attribute their successes to internal factors and their failures to external factors. We think our successes are due to our skill and our failures are due to bad luck. You can use this knowledge by helping people feel ownership of positive outcomes. When someone succeeds using your advice, help them see how their effort and decisions contributed to the success. When teams achieve goals, highlight each person's specific contributions. This doesn't just feel good, it makes people more likely to repeat successful behaviors and more confident about tackling future challenges. The availability cascade. Ideas become more believable simply because we hear them more often. Repeated exposure to an idea makes it seem more true regardless of actual evidence. You can use this by consistently reinforcing your key messages. Don't just say something once. Find different ways to communicate the same core ideas over time. If you believe a certain approach works best, mention it in different contexts, reference it in various conversations, and share examples that support it. But be careful, this effect works for false ideas too. Just because something sounds familiar doesn't make it true. Use this principle to reinforce genuinely good ideas and help them stick in people's minds. The key is variation. Say the same thing in different ways rather than repeating identical phrases, which can sound robotic and lose impact. The illusory truth effect. Repetition breeds belief, even when we know better. This is closely related to the availability cascade, but more specific. When people hear the same statement multiple times, they rate it as more true than statements they've heard only once, even when they know the source isn't credible. Politicians and advertisers have long understood this power. You can use it ethically by repeating important truths that people need to remember. If you want someone to internalize a key principle, don't just mention it once in a training session, reference it again in follow-up emails, bring it up in relevant conversations, and cite it when giving examples. But remember, this effect works on false information too, so be very careful about what you repeat. Only reinforce ideas you genuinely believe are helpful and true. The generation effect. People remember information better when they generate it themselves rather than just reading it. When someone comes up with an idea or fills in a blank, they remember it more vividly than if you had simply told them the same information. You can use this by asking questions that lead people to your conclusions rather than just stating those conclusions directly. Instead of saying, "The best approach is to start with small changes," ask, "What do you think would be the best way to begin implementing this?" and guide them toward realizing that small changes work best. Instead of listing the benefits of your proposal, ask, "What problems do you think this would solve?" and let them identify the benefits themselves. When people generate the insights, they feel ownership of the ideas and remember them better. The spacing effect. Information learned over multiple sessions is remembered better than information crammed into one session. This is why cramming for exams works poorly for long-term retention. Your brain consolidates information better when there are gaps between learning sessions. You can use this when teaching others or when trying to influence someone's thinking over time. Don't try to make all your points in one conversation. Spread important messages across multiple interactions. Introduce an idea briefly, let it settle, then return to it later with more detail or examples. This approach feels less overwhelming and allows people to process and internalize information more effectively. It also gives you multiple opportunities to address questions or concerns that arise between sessions. The testing effect. Retrieving information from memory strengthens it more than just reviewing it. Simply rereading notes or rehearing information doesn't strengthen memory as much as actively trying to recall it. You can use this by asking people to summarize what they've learned, explain concepts back to you, or describe how they plan to apply new information. Instead of just presenting information and moving on, create opportunities for people to actively retrieve and use what they've learned. Ask follow-up questions like, "How would you explain this to someone else?" Or, "What's the most important thing you're taking away from this?" When people actively recall information, they're much more likely to remember and use it later.
The picture superiority effect. Images are remembered better than words, and words with images are remembered better than words alone. Our brains are wired to process and remember visual information more effectively than text. You can use this by incorporating relevant images into your presentations, using visual metaphors in your explanations, and helping people create mental pictures of abstract concepts. Instead of just describing a process, draw a simple diagram. Instead of listing benefits, help people visualize what success would look like. When telling stories, include vivid visual details that help people see the scene in their minds. The more you can help people create visual memories of your ideas, the more likely they are to remember and act on them. The von Restorff effect in action. Making something physically different makes it psychologically significant. Beyond just standing out in lists, you can use physical differentiation to signal importance. When everything in a presentation looks the same, nothing feels important. When one slide has a different background color, people pay attention. When one item in a proposal is formatted differently, people assume it's more significant. Use this sparingly but strategically. Make your most important points visually distinct through color, size, positioning, or formatting. But remember, if everything is highlighted, nothing is highlighted. Choose one or two truly crucial elements to make visually different and let the contrast do the work of signaling their importance. The compound effect of small psychological nudges. The real power comes not from any single trick, but from combining them thoughtfully.
Each of these psychological principles is like a small current in a river. Individually, they create gentle influences. But when multiple currents flow in the same direction, they create a powerful force that can move mountains. The master practitioners of influence don't rely on one dramatic technique. They weave together multiple subtle approaches that all point toward the same outcome. They use social proof and authority together. They combine scarcity with reciprocity. They blend anchoring with the contrast principle. But here's the crucial insight that separates ethical influence from manipulation. They use these tools to help people make decisions that are genuinely good for them, not just beneficial to the influencer.
The curiosity loop. Once you open a mental loop in someone's mind, they become psychologically compelled to close it. Television shows have mastered this technique. They pose a question at the beginning of an episode, then make you wait until the end for the answer. Your brain literally cannot let go of unresolved questions. It keeps working on them in the background until they're answered. You can create these loops in conversations by introducing a puzzle early and promising to resolve it later. I discovered something about our biggest challenge that completely changed my perspective. Let me show you the data first, then I'll explain what I realized. The key is making sure the payoff is worth the wait. Don't create false loops or leave them unresolved. That breeds frustration rather than engagement. The labor theory of love. People value things more when they've invested effort in creating them. Children prefer origami they folded themselves over identical professionally made versions. People rate their own amateur drawings higher than similar drawings by others. This isn't just pride. It's a deep psychological attachment to things we've helped create. You can use this by involving others in developing solutions rather than presenting finished ideas. Ask for their input on your proposals. Let them suggest modifications or improvements. When they've contributed to shaping an idea, they feel ownership of it. The investment of their mental energy makes them more committed to seeing it succeed. The pratfall effect. A small mistake can actually make you more likable if you're already seen as competent. When highly competent people make minor errors, others find them more relatable and trustworthy. But this only works if competence is already established. Incompetent people become less likable when they make mistakes. You can use this by occasionally sharing small, harmless mistakes or vulnerabilities after you've demonstrated your expertise. Spill coffee before a presentation you then deliver flawlessly. Admit you initially misunderstood something before explaining your current clear understanding. These small human moments make you more approachable without undermining your credibility. The serial position effect. In any sequence, people remember the first few items and the last few items best. This combines the primacy and recency effects into a powerful tool for organizing information. When presenting multiple ideas, put your strongest ones first and last, with supporting details in the middle. When listing qualifications, start with your most impressive credential and end with your most relevant one. When giving feedback, begin with the most important point and conclude with the most actionable one. The items in the middle positions will be forgotten, so use those spots for supporting information rather than key messages. The identifiable victim effect. People respond more strongly to individual stories than to statistics about many people. Quote, "One death is a tragedy, a million deaths is a statistic." End quote. Our brains are wired to connect with individual stories more than abstract numbers. Instead of saying, "This will help thousands of customers," tell the story of one specific customer and how it helped them. Instead of, "Studies show this works," describe how it worked for one particular person. The more specific and personal you can make your examples, the more emotionally compelling they become. This doesn't mean ignoring data. Combine statistics with stories to engage both logical and emotional processing.
The focusing illusion. Whatever people are thinking about right now seems more important than it actually is. When someone is focused on a problem, that problem feels overwhelming and all-consuming. When they're focused on a solution, that solution seems obviously correct. You can use this by directing attention strategically. When discussing problems, help people focus on the aspects you can solve. When presenting solutions, highlight the benefits that matter most to them. When people are worried about risks, shift their focus to the safeguards you've put in place. The key is guiding attention toward the elements that support your message while acknowledging other concerns appropriately. The endowment effect with ideas. People become attached to ideas they've expressed even if they weren't originally committed to them. Once someone argues for a position, even if they were just playing devil's advocate, they start to genuinely believe it more strongly. You can use this by asking people to explain the benefits of your proposal in their own words. How do you think this would help your team? When they articulate the advantages themselves, they become more invested in those benefits. You can also use this to help people talk themselves into good decisions by asking them to list reasons why something might work well. The sleeper effect. Messages from low credibility sources become more persuasive over time. When people first hear information from a questionable source, they discount it heavily. But over time, they remember the information while forgetting the source. The message becomes more influential as the negative association with the source fades. This suggests that good ideas can eventually win even if they come from unexpected places. Don't dismiss valuable insights just because of their source, and don't assume your own good ideas will be immediately accepted if people have concerns about your credibility. Sometimes patience is the best strategy. Let time separate your ideas from any initial resistance. The IKEA effect. People value things more highly when they've assembled them themselves. This is the labor theory of love applied specifically to construction and creation. People rate furniture they've assembled as more valuable than identical pre-assembled pieces. You can apply this by letting others participate in building solutions. Instead of presenting a complete plan, provide a framework and let them fill in some details. Instead of solving their problems entirely, give them tools and guidance to solve problems themselves. When people contribute to creating something, they feel ownership and pride that makes them more committed to its success.
The Google effect. People remember less information when they know they can easily access it later. Our brains are efficient. They don't waste energy memorizing information that's readily available elsewhere. But this means people also pay less attention to information they think they can look up later. You can use this by making important information feel exclusive or time-sensitive. Instead of, "I'll send you the details later," say, "Let me share the key insights now, and I'll follow up with supporting materials." When information feels special or limited, people pay more attention and remember it better. The Dunning-Kruger effect. People with limited knowledge in a domain overestimate their competence in that domain. The less someone knows about a topic, the more confident they tend to be about their opinions on it. This creates both challenges and opportunities. When dealing with overconfident people, ask questions that reveal the complexity they're missing. Not to embarrass them, but to help them recognize what they don't know. When you're the expert, be patient with those who don't yet understand the nuances. And examine your own confidence levels. Are there areas where you might be overestimating your knowledge? The contrast sensitivity in time. Recent experiences heavily influence how we interpret new experiences. If someone just came from a frustrating meeting, they're more likely to find problems with your proposal. If they just received good news, they're more likely to be optimistic about your ideas. You can use this by timing your important conversations carefully. Schedule crucial discussions after positive events when possible. If you know someone has been dealing with difficulties, acknowledge that context and perhaps delay non-urgent requests. When timing isn't controllable, help people shift their emotional state before important discussions. The processing fluency effect. Information that's easier to process feels more true and more valuable. Simple fonts are more believable than complex ones. Clear language is more persuasive than jargon. Smooth presentations are more convincing than choppy ones. Make your communications as easy to process as possible. Use familiar words instead of technical terms when appropriate. Structure your arguments logically and predictably. Remove unnecessary complexity that doesn't add value. When people can easily understand your message, they're more likely to believe it and act on it.
The rhyme as reason effect. Statements that rhyme are perceived as more true and more memorable. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit was memorable partly because it rhymed. Our brains interpret processing fluency as a sign of truth, and rhymes are easier to process and remember. While you don't want to sound like a children's book in professional settings, occasional use of alliteration, rhythm, or rhyme can make key messages stickier. Plan the work, then work the plan. Progress, not perfection. Use this sparingly for your most important points. The denomination effect. People are less likely to spend large bills than the equivalent amount in smaller bills. This applies beyond money to any resource that feels chunky versus divisible. People are more reluctant to use a day of vacation time than 2 half-days. They're more protective of a 2-hour block than 4 30-minute segments. When asking for someone's time or resources, break large requests into smaller components when possible. Instead of, "Can you spend a day helping with this project?" try, "Could you spend a couple of hours this morning and a couple more this afternoon working on this?" The amplification bias. People predict that future emotional states will be more intense and last longer than they actually do. We overestimate both the intensity and duration of future feelings, both positive and negative. People think getting a promotion will make them happier for longer than it does, and they think setbacks will be more devastating than they are. You can use this knowledge to help people make better decisions by encouraging them to consider how they'll actually feel in a few months, not just immediately. You can also provide reassurance during difficult times by reminding people that intense feelings, both good and bad, tend to fade. The intention-action gap. There's often a large gap between what people intend to do and what they actually do. Most people intend to exercise more, eat better, and save money, but struggle to follow through. You can help people bridge this gap by making it easier to act on good intentions.
Instead of asking for general commitments, ask for specific, time-bound actions. Instead of, let me know if you need help, offer, I'll check in with you Thursday to see how it's going. Create systems and reminders that turn good intentions into actual behaviors.
The spotlight effect. People overestimate how much others notice their mistakes and awkward moments. We think everyone is watching and judging our every move, but most people are too focused on themselves to pay that much attention to others. You can use this knowledge to take more social risks and be more authentic. That slightly awkward thing you said, most people didn't notice or have already forgotten. You can also help others by reassuring them that their mistakes are less visible than they think, which frees them to focus on solutions rather than embarrassment. The curse of knowledge. Once you know something, it's hard to imagine not knowing it. Experts often struggle to communicate with beginners because they can't remember what it was like to not understand the topic. When you're explaining something you know well, consciously slow down and check for understanding. Use analogies to familiar concepts. Ask questions to gauge comprehension. Remember that what seems obvious to you might be completely new to others. The better you become at something, the more effort you need to put into explaining it clearly to newcomers. The ostrich effect. People tend to avoid information that might be unpleasant or challenging. When investments are losing money, people check their portfolios less frequently. When health problems develop, people delay going to the doctor. This avoidance often makes problems worse. You can use this knowledge by making important but potentially uncomfortable information easier to face. Present difficult truths alongside clear action steps. Offer support and solutions along with problems. Frame challenges as opportunities for improvement rather than just criticisms. The reactance theory. When people feel their freedom is threatened, they desire the forbidden option more. Tell someone they can't do something, and suddenly they want to do it more than ever. This is why reverse psychology sometimes works, but it's risky and can backfire. A better approach is to emphasize choice and autonomy. Instead of, you need to do this, try, you have several options, including this one. Instead of, don't make this mistake, explain the consequences and let people decide. When people feel they're choosing freely, they're more committed to their decisions. The affect heuristic. Current mood influences decision-making more than it should. When people feel good, they see more benefits and fewer risks. When they feel bad, they see more risks and fewer benefits. The same proposal can be evaluated very differently depending on the recipient's mood when they receive it. While you can't control people's moods, you can be aware of their emotional state and adjust your approach accordingly. If someone seems stressed or upset, it might be better to postpone important discussions or spend time addressing their concerns first. The ambiguity effect. People avoid options with uncertain outcomes, even when the uncertainty might work in their favor. Most people would rather have a guaranteed $50 than a 50% chance of winning $120, even though the uncertain option has higher expected value. This bias toward certainty can work for or against you. When presenting options, emphasize the certainties and minimize the focus on uncertain aspects. When possible, offer guarantees or trial periods that reduce perceived risk. Help people focus on what they can control rather than what they can't predict. The cheerleader effect.
People are rated as more attractive when seen in a group than when seen alone. This applies beyond physical attractiveness to general favorability. Ideas seem better when presented alongside other good ideas. Your qualifications seem more impressive when mentioned along with other people's achievements. You seem more credible when you're associated with other credible people. Whenever possible, present yourself and your ideas in the context of other positive examples. But make sure the associations are genuine and relevant. Forced connections can backfire. The hyperbolic discounting. People heavily discount future benefits in favor of immediate rewards. Most people would choose $50 today over $100 in a year, even though waiting would double their money. This preference for immediate gratification affects many decisions. When proposing long-term benefits, try to identify some immediate wins as well. Break long-term goals into shorter milestones with their own rewards. Help people visualize future benefits in concrete, immediate terms. The more you can make future rewards feel present and tangible, the more motivating they become.
The planning fallacy extended. Not only do people underestimate time, they also underestimate costs, risks, and effort required. This bias affects almost every aspect of project planning. People assume the best-case scenario while ignoring potential complications. You can help others by asking them to consider what could go wrong, what additional resources they might need, and what they'll do if things take longer than expected. When making your own plans, add buffer time and resources. The key is planning for reality, not just the ideal scenario. The Lake Wobegon effect. Most people believe they're above average in most areas. This impossible statistical situation, everyone can't be above average, reveals our tendency towards self-enhancement. While this can lead to overconfidence, it also means people are generally receptive to messages that confirm their positive self-image. When giving feedback or making requests, connect them to people's existing positive self-concepts. Given your attention to detail, knowing how much you care about quality, this approach feels affirming rather than demanding. The Baader-Meinhof phenomenon. Once you notice something, you start seeing it everywhere. Also called the frequency illusion, this effect makes recently learned information seem suddenly ubiquitous. You can use this by helping people identify patterns and concepts they can then recognize in their daily lives. When teaching someone a new skill, point out opportunities to practice it. When sharing an insight, help them see how it applies to various situations. Once people have a framework for noticing something, they'll start seeing examples everywhere, which reinforces the learning. The courtesy bias. People give answers they think the questioner wants to hear, rather than their true opinions. This is especially strong in face-to-face interactions and with people we want to please. When seeking honest feedback, create psychological safety for negative responses. Ask questions that assume problems exist. What's the biggest challenge with this approach, rather than, do you see any problems? Use anonymous feedback methods when possible. Make it clear that honest criticism is more valuable than polite agreement. The declinism bias. People tend to view the past more favorably and the present/future more negatively. Things were better in the old days is a common refrain, regardless of objective evidence. This bias can make people resistant to change and pessimistic about new ideas. When proposing innovations, acknowledge what was good about previous approaches while highlighting genuine improvements. Help people see that some changes represent returns to valuable principles, not abandonment of them. Frame new approaches as building on past wisdom rather than rejecting it. The empathy gap. People in one emotional state have trouble predicting how they'll feel in another emotional state. When we're calm, we can't imagine being angry. When we're stressed, we can't remember what it feels like to be relaxed. This affects decision-making and planning. Help people make better choices by encouraging them to consider how they'll feel in different circumstances. When someone is emotional, help them recognize that their current state is temporary. When they're making long-term decisions, help them consider various future emotional contexts. The focusing effect. People give disproportionate weight to one factor when making decisions. When buying a car, someone might focus entirely on fuel efficiency and ignore safety, comfort, or reliability. When choosing jobs, they might focus only on salary and ignore culture, growth opportunities, or work-life balance. Help people make better decisions by encouraging them to consider multiple factors. Create frameworks that ensure important considerations aren't overlooked. When presenting options, highlight how they perform across various criteria, not just the most obvious ones. The gambler's fallacy. People believe that past events affect future probabilities in independent situations. After 5 coin flips come up heads, people think tails is due on the 6th flip. Each flip is actually independent with 50-50 odds. This fallacy affects many decisions involving chance or cycles. Help people recognize when events are truly independent versus when past patterns do predict future outcomes. In business, this might mean understanding when a string of successes or failures indicates a trend versus when they're just random variation. The halo effect in evaluation. One positive trait influences how we evaluate all other traits. If someone is physically attractive, we assume they're also intelligent and kind. If a company has great customer service, we assume their products are high quality too. You can leverage this by ensuring your strongest attribute is visible early and prominently. If you're highly organized, make sure people see evidence of that organization. If your product has one standout feature, highlight it prominently so it creates positive assumptions about other features. The illusion of control. People overestimate their ability to control outcomes. We think we can influence random events through our actions or choices. Gamblers believe they can affect dice rolls through how they throw them. Investors think they can time markets through research and intuition. While some confidence is helpful, excessive belief in control can lead to poor decisions. Help people focus their energy on what they actually can control, while accepting uncertainty in areas they cannot influence. The information bias. People seek more information even when it won't help them make better decisions. Sometimes we delay decisions hoping that more data will make the choice obvious, even when we already have enough information to decide. Other times we gather irrelevant information that makes us feel more confident without actually improving our judgment. Help people identify what information they actually need versus what they want. Set deadlines for information gathering. Focus on the few key factors that will most influence the outcome rather than trying to gather complete information about everything. The just world hypothesis. People want to believe the world is fair and that people get what they deserve. This leads to victim blaming and excessive confidence that good behavior will be rewarded. While some optimism about fairness is healthy, excessive belief in a just world can lead to poor preparation for unfair outcomes. Help people balance faith in eventual justice with practical preparation for unfair situations. Acknowledge that while good behavior generally leads to better outcomes, it doesn't guarantee them. The less is better effect. Sometimes people prefer a smaller set that seems complete over a larger set that seems incomplete. People might prefer a dinnerware set of 8 complete place settings over a set of 12 place settings with 2 broken pieces, even though the larger set has more usable pieces. This applies to many situations beyond objects. A smaller team where everyone contributes might seem better than a larger team where some members are less engaged. When presenting options, consider whether completeness and quality might be more appealing than quantity with some weaknesses. The money illusion. People focus on nominal amounts rather than real purchasing power. A 3% raise feels good, even if inflation is 4%, meaning purchasing power actually decreased.
This bias affects many financial decisions. When discussing compensation, investments, or costs, help people consider the real value rather than just the numbers. Put financial figures in context of what they can actually buy or accomplish. This helps people make more informed decisions about money and value. The normalcy bias. People underestimate threats and assume things will return to normal. During emergencies, people often fail to respond appropriately because they can't believe the situation is as serious as it appears. This bias also affects business and personal planning. People assume current conditions will continue even when change is likely. Help people prepare for various scenarios, not just the most likely one. When changes are happening, help others recognize their significance, rather than assuming they're temporary blips. The outcome bias. People judge decisions based on outcomes rather than the quality of the decision-making process. A risky decision that happens to work out is seen as brilliant, while a good decision with an unlucky outcome is seen as poor judgment. This bias can lead to repeating bad processes that got lucky and abandoning good processes that were unlucky. Focus evaluation on the decision-making process. Was the information gathering thorough? Were alternatives considered? Were risks assessed appropriately? Good processes don't guarantee good outcomes, but they improve the odds. The present bias. People give stronger weight to immediate rewards than to future rewards. This is similar to hyperbolic discounting, but broader. It affects all kinds of present versus future trade-offs, not just financial ones. People choose immediate pleasure over long-term health, immediate convenience over long-term efficiency, immediate comfort over long-term growth. Help people make better long-term decisions by making future consequences feel more immediate and concrete. Create accountability systems that bring future consequences into the present through regular check-ins and milestones. The restraint bias. People overestimate their ability to resist temptation. Most people think they have more willpower than they actually do. They put themselves in tempting situations, confident they'll make good choices, then wonder why they failed. Help people succeed by helping them avoid temptation rather than relying on willpower alone. Change environments to make good choices easier and bad choices harder. Create systems that don't require constant self-control to maintain good habits. The third-person effect. People believe others are more influenced by media, advertising, and bias than they are themselves. Everyone thinks they're immune to manipulation while others are susceptible to it. This bias makes people overconfident about their own objectivity while being overly suspicious of others' reasoning. Recognize that you're probably more influenced by various biases than you think, and others are probably more rational than you assume. This humility leads to better decision-making and more productive collaboration. The wisdom of integration. The ultimate psychological trick is knowing when and how to combine all these insights into a coherent approach to human interaction. After exploring 99 specific psychological principles, the most important insight is that human behavior emerges from the complex interaction of all these forces. People are not simple machines that respond predictably to single inputs. They are complex beings influenced by multiple psychological currents simultaneously. The master of human psychology doesn't rely on individual tricks, but understands how to create conditions where multiple positive influences align. They know when to use social proof and when it might backfire. They understand how timing affects receptivity. They recognize when someone needs logical arguments versus emotional connection. Most importantly, they use these insights to create genuine value for others, not just to get what they want. The highest form of psychological wisdom is using your understanding of how minds work to help people make decisions that truly serve their best interests. In doing so, you become not a manipulator, but a guide, someone who helps others navigate the complex landscape of human choice with greater wisdom and better outcomes.